Well, hi everybody. It's Joe Chaffee here. It is a Wednesday night on what was a really windy, dreary day today. A lot of clouds. Whenever the wind is this fierce and you got an overcast sky all day long, there's just a sense of gloom and doom about it. If there's a little sun out, at least that kind of brightens things up a bit. But when you've got this screaming northwest wind, and we had some gusts, they peaked at about midday into early afternoon. We had some gusts up to about 40 miles an hour or so, some places even into the 40s. And I saw Johnny Quest, you had gust up, what was it, you said 60 on the chat? The winds were strong basically from Long Island and New York City southward through New Jersey down into the Chesapeake Bay area and in through parts of Virginia. The center of the max winds and the tightest pressure gradient was actually from there south. From there north and east, the gradient, believe it or not, was not quite as tight. Joe Rao is going to be joining me in just a second, so just before he gets here, it'll give me just a moment to let everybody know if you're in the New York City, Long Island, northern New Jersey, lower Hudson Valley, so mainly south of Route 84, and in coastal Connecticut, I do have my free weather app. I'm going to put the link up on the chat tonight here, on the live chat. It's on Google Play, so if you go to Google Play and just search Joe Chaffee, JoeCioffi, you can download my free weather app. Also, for those of you who are interested in perhaps getting a more complete, let's call it, weather experience, you can do that by joining my Patreon platform. It's a subscription platform, just $2 a month, and those $2, it's a cup of coffee, and it goes a long way to support what I'm doing with respect to my videos, my posts every day, 7 days a week, morning, noon, and sometimes night. So if weather is your thing, I think you might like the Patreon platform a lot because we do have private live streams just for Patreon members. We had one this morning along with posts just for Patreon members, and you can message me at any time with questions or comments or conversation. So here's the link to that, and we will leave it up there. It's on the chat, on the live chat for those of you who are interested. And thank you for those of you who have joined. Mr. Rao should be walking in at any moment. So in the meantime, let's get started. And all the activity is now centered on this developing animal that is out in the Atlantic. And I mean animal here. We're talking about a major storm that is intensifying very rapidly. The pressures have fallen some 20 millibars in the last 6 hours or so. I mean, this thing is really wrapping up. And you can see on the corner here of the U.S. satellite view that huge comma-shaped swirl that just dominates the weather picture and is about to bring some very heavy rains into Newfoundland and into Nova Scotia, and some heavy snows as well. Mr. Rao has just made his entrance, believe it or not. So we will wait for him to be seated here. And we just got started here just minutes ago, Joseph. Took care of a little business before you got here.
Okay.
You don't have to tie your shoes to be on camera.
I mean, they might, trip or something. So here we are.
How did you deal with the wind today, Mr. Rao?
Well, I've been married for 34 and a half years, so I've dealt with a lot of wind.
Oh, boy. Is she watching tonight?
No, I don't think so. That's why I say.
Because I don't have editing capabilities.
Oh.
So
it just came all out.
It certainly did. Okay, so here's what I'm going to bring up. Let me bring up. I got a different satellite picture tonight because I just showed everybody that storm, and here is
the one near Nova Scotia.
The one near Nova Scotia, Scotia. I have people watching from Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. So be nice.
All right.
They're very loyal.
I used to do a radio station in Yarmouth, Nova Scotia, so I'm well aware of. There's a lot of respect for the people who live on that island province.
That's the weather there can get pretty rough sometimes.
Yeah. you get a good wind off of the Bay of Fundy in the wintertime, and you can get on the lee side of the bay snow showers, kind of similar to what they get along the lee of the Great Lakes. And in fact, when I was doing that, what was the name? What were the call letters? C something, CJ something. Anyway, I used to call them Fundy flurries. I said, we're gonna have some Fundy flurries later. You know, it's
this is an animal that's up there.
Yeah.
You know,
my goodness.
the pressure went from 987 to I believe 961
Wow.
on the last surface plot, which I'm going to bring up. The trail, by the way, you can also see just elsewhere. You got this subtropical moisture that's coming in to Mexico and Texas, and some of that's probably going to get involved with energy that's coming in now from the west, and that's going to be our weekend weather system here.
And we're still suggesting that temperatures on Sunday will ride well into the 50s, although if we get any kind of a cold air damming setup, some folks may be stuck with temperatures in the 40s, where just a stone's throw away might be in the 50s to near 60s. So we'll see how it all pans out, at least in the immediate New York tri-state area.
And you got the full disk on the top and the U.S. loop here on the bottom, just to give you perspective, with the tighter view. But this very busy weather pattern that we have. And if you look at the loop on the full disk, you could see the split with the subtropical jet down in the south. You've got this screaming Pacific jet coming into the west coast. And then you've got some energy with the big trough that's in the east at the moment with the cold Canadian air. So you got a flow coming from up into Canada into the northeast. And by the way, that chilly air goes all the way down into Florida.
You know, as you're talking, I'm watching with fascination. This, of course, is the brand new GOES 16, and you can see how up in the far northern regions of this loop, that daylight never arrives. It's up in the polar regions of Canada, it just stays on the dark side.
Yes,
the
right up, exactly.
Yeah,
that's it's a little different perspective when we see it in the summertime. You see that whole line just kind of waving across, and then it's always daylight on the top, so it just cuts off at some point.
So that's great.
Awesome. Okay, so I got the NAM on the edge of the NAM, the very edge of the data that the NAM gets. It cuts off. So eastern Newfoundland is getting snow and rain. It's just that the NAM doesn't go out that far out to the east. And very interesting if you watch this on the loop. That low pressure on the initial was 961. Early this morning at 12Z it was at a 987 low. It gets down to a 947, 46. We get a 45 in there. No, 46 is the peak. And look, you got this big band of heavy precip that comes in, and if the NAM is correct, it does change it to heavy snow over much of Nova Scotia as that low rotates around. And Joe, you got a big blocking high up in Labrador underneath that block, so it can't go further north anymore. So it only gets so far.
It kind of retrogresses.
And then, and it
does the
loop, and then it moves southeast, and then east, and then goodbye. So it's all finally wrapping up sometime early Friday morning, during the early morning hours on Friday.
Like the low was saying, well, I wanted to go to Labrador, but that big thing up north didn't allow me, so I'm just going to go right out over the ocean. So, and there you go.
And if you want to believe some of these snow amounts in centimeters, up to 30 and 40 centimeters being generated, the GFS has much less. One of the things about the GFS, and this, if you remember, started last winter in March, where the model for some reason got this warm bias, and it showed rain, and we wound up getting all those places that got heavy snow.
Right.
Whereas the GFS, and the GFS actually did that in the mid-November or mid-November snowfall, where it had rain everywhere, and we knew that wasn't the case. So I'm going to kind of lean on the NAM here as maybe having a better handle on this. And it's going for mostly snow with some big snow amounts as you go inland in Nova Scotia and then head up into New Brunswick and also in Newfoundland. Again, in that southeast corner, it's that the data is cut off, so we just don't know. There's probably some snow there for sure.
I over the last couple of winters, I don't know what it is, but the GFS is the quote newer of the two models. The NAM, of course, the NAM dates back to the days of the old NGM, the nested grid model, And there was a time when it was saying, like, let's phase it out or whatever like that. But I got to tell you, the NAM, at least in the winter seasons, had been really more the model of choice in terms of its portrayal of temperatures and its portrayal of precipitation type. It certainly did a great job with our storm a couple of weeks ago, and I agree with you 100%. I would lean more on the NAM's portrayal of what is happening in terms of the type of precipitation for Nova Scotia and Newfoundland, as opposed to the GFS, which has this bias of seemingly warming things up too quickly and showing or depicting more of a rain than snowpack.
And if any of our Nova Scotia, Newfoundland fans are on the chat board tonight, let us know what. I'd be curious as to what they're forecasting up there. I just put up the total precip for Nova Scotia. So in terms of liquid precip, we're looking at 45 to 50 centimeters or higher in many areas. So that's a sizable amount of liquid for any storm.
Absolutely. I kind of wonder too whether or not now, of course, in Canada, the weather service, the government weather service, is Environment Canada, and Canada has its own Canadian model.
Well, you know what? Let's look at the Canadian model.
Okay.
Since we,
I sometimes wonder whether or not they rely heavily on their own model, or whether or not they look at the other models, the American model, the European model.
I'm sure they have the whole suite that's available.
I'm sure they do. Yeah, they do.
So here's the Canadian model. It kind of has the precip a little bit further to the south and east, but let's see what it does with the snow. Well, even the Canadian does, prints out maybe less than the NAM does, but every bit of 20 to 30 centimeters for inland areas.
Right.
So it's kind of on the same page, and on the surface, because we do have, I forget to show the Canadian model when I'm showing the Canadian maps, which would kind of make sense. So letting these load out, I'm just going to run it backwards here. So there's your low, 57, 51, 54. So they're all kind of in the same ballpark. Rain changes over to snow. Again, the NAM seems to have a more aggressive look with the snow area, but even the Canadian, I think, has more than the GFS does. And then that blocking high that's to the north. And then it just kind of hits that block, can't go anywhere, moves southeast and east, and then goes bye-bye.
There's a little storm to the north and east. It kind of like does a little pirouette with that
storm.
Yeah,
and then they go out.
Dozy-do.
And they go out together.
Yeah.
All right, let's come back home because we've got a busy weather pattern ahead. And I'm going to set this map up, and we're going to come back to it. We'll set up the upper air. And we'll get the GFS. We're going to do a little GFS European comparisons a bit later on. But here's the surface map tonight across the U.S. and particularly across the Northeast. There's your low. On the last analysis, the 21Z was down to 967 and counting. So
that's a heck of an occluded front right there.
Yeah, I mean, you see the gradient's very tight east of Nova Scotia, between Nova Scotia and Newfoundland. Gradient was kind of loose. So you look at I'll show the wind gusts in a minute, but the gradient's kind of loose a bit, and then it tightened up again, like right over us.
Right.
So the storm played a role, but it was more. I'm not sure why the isobar, what's going on in here that pushed the gradient and made it very tight from New Jersey down into Virginia. That's where some of the.
You think maybe there might have been some kind of a secondary center that was.
Well, that could be what's left of the primary, because the primary was up in western Maine,
right?
And that's probably what that is. It's it's the remnant, whatever's the remnant is of the primary low. So the gradient actually is kind of pinned against the lower pressures with the primary low, and less so with the storm out east of Nova Scotia. But it's all part of the same, the same thing here. And we've got a high sitting down in Kentucky, so that's the other end of it. Large pressure change, relatively short distance, and you've got issues. These are wind gusts, not temperatures. I put up the wind gusts. Now, the winds have eased from earlier today, so much of the gusts now are in the 20s. We've got still a few low 30s gusts going on in around Long Island and coastal New Jersey, and of course offshore we're looking at wind gusts out into the 40s. But you run up through Boston and on up into Maine, I would have expected to see stronger winds than this.
Well, I think the reason why they're not as strong, the artifact of what you just mentioned about the the old storm, the primary being in that vicinity.
Right.
Kind of like being in the eye of the storm, if you will, nearer the center. And there, you got
We're on-
45 mile per hour. And that's mile per hour, or is that not?
I think these are in miles per hour.
Right.
So yeah, 45, gust of 40, 45. The storm's not quite there yet, but look at this. This is in southwestern Newfoundland, 58, 51, 63. I want to see if
That's
I
a very strong tropical
yeah.
storm.
Well, I mean, you look at that pressure. I mean, that's almost a category. That's a Cat 3 hurricane in terms of pressure. I'm just going to see if I can add on a few more obs. Sometimes I get lucky.
The thing about in Nova Scotia, in Newfoundland, right down by the coast, I think it's St. John's, and then there's another St. John, I think, on Nova Scotia. So there's a John, and then there's a John's, and I always get them confused.
I just want to see if they have. Just going through this really fast. See if I could get my eye catches anything like Nova Scotia or Newfoundland. We'll get into the end just to see if we can add a few more obs. And I'm thinking, no, we don't see it. There was one little option there for Canada, and it came up with no stations available. All right, so let me get rid of this. And here's on the east coast, we've got winds up to 30 to 40 miles an hour along the coast. I just wonder what it's like to be sitting out here, somewhere out here
close.
during a storm.
That's very close to a town. I have actually been. I was on a cruise once. It was a whale watching cruise, and we did visit Newfoundland. And in Bona Vista, which is not too far from where you were just pointing, Bona Vista, Newfoundland, the mayor looked like a lady, probably in her late 50s or 60s, was actually at the dock to welcome everybody coming off the cruise ship.
That's pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, there was a very lovely area. Newfoundland is was it Newfoundland? I think it was Gander. Newfoundland. Yeah, there's a play on Broadway, Come Away, I think.
Yes.
That's where all the aircraft on 9/11 ended up landing, and the people just opened up their homes. It was a wonderful experience that they did something like that for complete strangers, and that's the way it is. Having been to Newfoundland, the people up there are just wonderful, and
on my list of places to go. I was trying to get the temperatures to show up again. I couldn't get them to pop up, but we have 40s all the way down into northern Florida right now. It's pretty cold there.
Yeah.
We've had some snow showers up in upstate New York, and they've been really busy today with snow showers running along the New York State-Vermont border down to the Massachusetts New York
Lake
border.
Champlain.
Yeah, and you had a little bit of snow at home
Yeah.
in Putnam County.
About 2 o'clock in the morning, I woke up, and I woke up only because in my bedroom we have shutters, which we open up during the morning and we close them again at night. But sometimes, in certain situations, let's say on the night of a full moon, it looks kind of bright out there through the cracks. I'm saying, why does it look so bright? And I opened the shutters a little bit, and my deck was completely white. And I said, where the heck did this come from? I knew where it came from. I was anticipating snow showers and flurries. I was not expecting it to be of the degree to actually cover the deck. Usually the first thing at my house is the deck, the wood,
Right.
is the first thing that gets covered. And it wasn't all that much, and it was gone by morning, but still, it was interesting. And you see, look at these snow showers, that wind must be almost straight 360 or 00. It's literally coming around right down through the Hudson River Valley, across Lake Champlain, and causing these snow showers right down the river valley.
Yeah,
there.
they came pretty. We actually had a few of them survive down with a few spot flurries and sprinkles in parts of New Jersey and Long Island. By the way, the storm offshore will throw back some of that snow back into Maine overnight, into eastern Maine, and it might even push back a little more southwest, maybe into toward the New Hampshire,
Green and White Mountains.
briefly.
Yeah.
But that should be it. Then it's all going to get out of here. Meanwhile, we've got this weak system moving through the northern plains. It's moving eastward, and it is weak. And wondering whether how much of this, if any of it, is going to be left here when it gets here on Friday. Maybe just high clouds, I think. And then we've got a powerhouse that's beginning to come into the west, and we're starting to see some rain coming into California with snows in the mountains there. Some snow up in the Rockies, getting ready to move into the Rockies, and also parts of Utah. And we've got rain and some snow in the higher ups up in the Pacific Northwest. So we do have, the system for Saturday is getting ready to come in, and this is going to be the next round of rain. I have the live cam here, Joe. This is actually
Syracuse.
Yeah, this is armorycam.com, and thank you for letting us use it. We've got, I said, a police officer standing on the corner there. I'm not sure. Just another gentleman coming up the street. There's not much going on here. You can see there was some snow earlier today. The ground was coated, but they must treat this really well, and the roads get wet as soon as the snow lightens up. But again, that's armorycam.com. I figured if it was going to be snowing in Syracuse with some of these lake effect snows that were coming in, plus the impact of the system, the snow from the energy from the upper low, that maybe we get lucky and get a shot of it snowing really hard, but it didn't quite work out that way. All right, so upper air time going forward, and this storm is going to pull out. The block breaks down. You've got this strong Pacific jet that's pretty far to the south. So you've got all this energy coming east, and here's the first system for Saturday night into Sunday. And that low, Joe, goes pretty far to the west. But right behind it is another powerhouse that comes in on Friday into the northwest and then drops down into California and Nevada. And that comes east. And this is this is the system where the models have been having difficulty. The second system for early next week, which would be about Tuesday. And we are kind of trying to figure out how this is all going to play. So we haven't really talked too much about it, you and I, today, so I'm curious as to what you're thinking.
I didn't really have, for, excuse me, for the Hudson Valley, I really did not go with all that much for Tuesday into Wednesday, at least, and how many days out now? We were almost a week out from this impending system. I wasn't sure whether or not we would get enough energy to have something happen, or whether or not the thing would actually shear off to our north, or maybe that there's a little ridge. It looks like it's along the mid-Atlantic coastline that might actually try to pump up a little bit and try to force that system for the most part to our west. So I really didn't have much to say about it now, but with due time, I'm sure it will come into a clearer focus for us.
Well, here's where I think the dilemma lies, and you just pretty much kind of set the table about it. So here, I got the paint box up. So this is our GFS from late this afternoon, which is actually somewhat different from the one from earlier today, which was somewhat different from the ones that ran last night. It's kind of gone back to this idea of what it had last night. So here's where the main difference lies, and I'll bring up the model run from earlier today, where you'll see where it's changed, and I think this is where the models are really kind of struggling with this. You've got, I think the key to all of this is going to be this northern jet here, okay, and the spacing that you see in between. You've got this low that's near Newfoundland. This is going to be the Saturday night system, and here's your next trough, okay? And actually, there's another one coming into the Pacific Northwest at that point. So the big question is right in here, is whether you get a ridge to pop up in between.
Right.
This run of the GFS has that northern jet much stronger, but if we go back, I'm going to go back one run to this afternoon, and this is also how the models were handling this during the day yesterday. This is for the same time period. And, whoops.
Wow.
I wasn't supposed to do that. That's weird. Hang on one second. So, let's...
Was there something underneath that map that we did not know of?
Oh, the secret map?
The secret map.
I got to get the paint box up again. Hang on one
The
second.
secret square.
Yes.
Maybe Paul Linda's underneath that map.
And, hang on. I'm having to juggle all this. A lot of times it's very difficult. All right, so we got that. All right, I have to leave this up. All right. I got to juggle all this, Joe. Sometimes it's a little.
I think sometimes you have just too much up there.
I do, but I try to have everything up front so I'm not digging for it afterward. All right, so here's the old GFS from earlier today.
The 12Z.
The 12Z. And there's a big difference here in the upper air because when you look at the area in between the upper low, you've got a much stronger ridge here
Right.
and a much weaker northern jet.
Right.
And this actually would imply that you could wind up taking low up the west side of the Appalachians up into western New York and a secondary that develops and kind of coast hugs, and you deal with maybe some frozen or freezing precip at the start and it goes over to rain. The European has an even different look in that it's all in the north on the European, okay, for the same period. Look at the difference between the European here. I'm going to bring that map up now. And let's put that back up. So here's the European for the same time frame.
Right. Where's the
Joe.
ridge?
Exactly.
Where's the beef?
Where is the ridge?
Yeah.
All right, I got to bring the paint box back up. Hang on.
One thing you do have to admire, though, is the fact that both the GFS and the European have a tremendous ridge. Look at all the building heights over Alaska and the Yukon.
Oh yeah, but well, wow, that's weird. Wrong brush. But look at the northern jet on the European. I mean, this is so much stronger.
Right.
You've got not only no ridge at all, but you actually have a weak, some kind of shortwave that's going through into New England here.
Right.
And the system coming eastward is suppressed so far to the south that you probably would wind up taking a low off the southeast coast and taking it out and goodbye if that's the case.
Which is pretty much what the monster now near Nova Scotia and Newfoundland was.
Right.
The trough was very sharp, and a lot of the energy was more to our south and to our east, which is why we didn't get blasted. It just kicked away from us. You think maybe the same thing might happen.
You know, and the odd thing is, if we pulled up the Canadian, the Canadian is basically a compromise between the two. It sort of splits the difference, and
Right.
you do wind up bringing a low and precip up here Tuesday night and Wednesday of next week. And I looked at the Icon model, the German model, actually takes the surface low into the Western Great Lakes. So go figure. All the models seem to be having trouble with this. The strength of this northern jet and how and it's going to have impact here in terms of how this all plays out going into next week. This is the second system, by the way. We're going to come back to the first system now, and
Who knows, maybe 50 or 75 years from now, there'll be one singular universal model. There won't be all these models with all these different equations.
Well, there's always going to be. I guess there's always going to be a sense of competition where. Somebody's going to want to say that whatever universal model is, that I could make a better one.
Yeah.
And by then, of course, we are long gone off this earth. We've already not only changed to rain, we've gone to drizzle and fog and done.
Right.
All right. So longer term, very interesting, I think. Active northern jet. You got all these systems that come in to the west. Now, there at some point. I think there probably might be a bit of a break here, but I don't trust the models beyond the 7-day upper air, and particularly in past day 10. It looks like there's a little bit of rearranging going on, but I did want to show something here. I showed this yesterday, Joe. I'm seeing it now for several runs, and Judah Cohen actually talked about this, but. On the GFS on or around, this is up at the stratosphere, the big polar vortex all the way up.
Right.
And if you remember, back last February, we had that monumental big warming in the poles and a split. We had actually an attempt at a split back a few weeks ago, which kind of led to this blocking pattern that we just had.
Right.
It was short-lived. There's a split coming around December 7th, 8th, and 9th. And you can see it here. There's two upper lows, one in Siberia, the other one drops down south of Greenland. So there's warming that's going on in the stratosphere here. If this is right, we could perhaps say that because there's a bit of a lag time in how that translates down to the surface, but something maybe toward the last 10 days of December, somewhere in there, could get active again.
Okay.
Well, we'll see. That's just let's throw something. I'm just throwing something out there. It may or may not stick, but it's very interesting. I'm still really kind of learning how this all works.
Now, you remember last December we had that blast of very cold weather that lingered into the early part of January. So who's to say that this might not happen again this year? Or at least it looks like that flow is taking stuff straight out of Siberia across into Canada and right down in our direction by, again, later on in the month.
All right, so back we go. We'll run through what's going to be happening here as far as the rest of the week and the weekend as soon as the maps load, which they are doing oh so slowly, but they're getting there. And by the way, I was talking yesterday about this I think this has been a remarkable month for November to see snow the way we've been seeing it.
Right.
In places Chicago, New York City, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Boston, all getting their first snows. Right. And, to have it all the way down to Washington, D.C., that's, and I'm not talking Dulles either, I'm talking, downtown Washington, right. D.C., because they wound up with, I think, a little over an inch from that system on the 15th. Okay, so we're loaded and ready to go. And, all right, so the gradient's going to slowly relax. You can see there's action out in the west. That lead system in the plains really doesn't amount to too much. You got a little moisture that gets injected in. The GFS seems to hold on to this for a little precip Friday afternoon or evening. The other models don't really have it. They kind of lose it. It's much ado about nothing as far as I'm concerned, even if we wind up getting a rain or snow shower.
Yeah, no big deal.
And then here comes the next low, which is going to go pretty far to the west. And there's probably going to be some heavy snows in parts of Nebraska, Iowa, southern Minnesota, Wisconsin with this.
Which they just had about 4 or 5 days ago.
Right. Well, 2 days back in Chicago. When was the Chicago snow? Now?
Sunday, Monday?
What's today? Wednesday?
Yeah, today's
so it's
Wednesday.
Sunday, Monday.
Yeah.
Okay, so there you've got more rain, and it looks like another 1 to 2 inch rain producer here. But I think, Joe, it's going to be out of here by maybe long before Sunday morning daybreak. It might be done by midnight Saturday night. And then Sunday it could go to 60 before the colder air, the cold front is really kind of back up in the lower lakes. And that comes through sometime, Sunday night, Monday morning. And then we watch this low come out for Tuesday night into Wednesday. This is the latest run, which is different from the other one. Now, this has a much more southern track as it moves off the Virginia coast and passes south of Long Island. Who knows if that's going to be right, because it's all about that northern jet stream.
Right. And what you're showing here is the GFS, the 18Z, I should say.
This is the 18Z.
Right.
Which was like the 0 and 6Z from last night.
Right.
It's very similar to what those model runs did.
Okay.
The earlier one today from this afternoon had the low go. It has this as a primary secondary. So you've got the primary going up the west side of the Appalachians, and then the secondary forms. This kind of matches up with the pattern we've been in.
Right.
And then goes, that low takes over completely and then runs out to the east-northeast from there. So it's really going to be a matter of the northern jet and which model has a better idea
Right.
of how it's going to come out. And then you've got this another system coming into the west, into California. I had a request for the 10-day snow map. So let's take a look. I'm sure it's going to be pretty extensive. And of course, remember, because it has a coastal low, but considering that we're talking here through December 7th, that snow cover is pretty far south for December 7th.
Yeah, it is.
It really is. I mean, now, being that we're going to have cold air to deal with here, I would imagine that a lot of that falls will hang around and is going to be there. So
no question.
That's a pretty impressive looking map.
The cold air pushing on down through central Canada, certainly a lot of that snow will be preserved for a while, especially over the plain states and the Midwest. And I still have a small little patch of snow on one part of my lawn from 2 weeks ago now. But we've had some pretty warm days, but there's still a little teeny tiny bit of snow, at least on my property, still lingering from 2 weeks ago.
And by the way, we'll translate it to liquid precip over the next 10 days. Still pretty busy across much of the Northeast. Some 2 to 3 inch amounts. Some big amounts in the Southeast and across the Gulf Coast. And big amounts in California, especially Central and Northern California. As far as these rain totals, looks like some 5-inch plus amounts over the next 10 days or so. So their rainy season has begun.
They have gone from one extreme to the other, from the wildfires, the drought, the dry conditions. Now all of a sudden they're on the other side of the coin, and now may soon have to worry about not only excessive amounts of rain, but also in some places mudslides and that sort of stuff.
By the way, I want to go back to. I'm just going to go back quick to the storm near Nova Scotia, because I just remembered that I did get a request to show the wind maps, and we'll just wait for them to load, which they're doing oh so slowly. I don't know why. Well, usually this happens when the new model runs are starting. Everybody's going on tropicaltidbits.com at the same time,
Right.
To take a look at these maps.
Peruse and take a look.
We're back to 162. And they're loading from the bottom up instead of the top down. So just be patient, everybody. Looks like I'm getting one map every second or so.
96.
And I have to go to 0 and 6 hour, not the 384. We're almost there. And
remember how when we were just starting in this business, we'd be so delighted to get a gander of a map that goes out as far as 72 or 84 hours.
Please. Yeah, that was. Here's the wind profile from the monster out here, and for us, the land winds continue to ease. You can see it probably on the lower left of the screen. You should be able to see the wind field back to about central New Jersey. Those winds will die off, and if we change the geography a little bit, we'll use this. So you can see the big winds up in Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, especially in the eastern part. And the winds are still pretty strong and gusty overnight into Thursday in the offshore waters, but then they start to diminish, and then, of course, you get into Thursday night and Friday, and it's really calms down a lot. So at least from the standpoint of the fierce winds that we had, Joe, they are going to finally diminish. So let's go. We'll go to the chat board, because everybody's on board tonight, and hopefully not bored. Let's bring that to the bottom. See if anybody's got any comments or questions. Yes, Jason Schaefer is absolutely correct. The European, we only can show the public maps that are available on the European, which are for 24-hour time frames. So we can't see in between. So we're very, very limited as to what we can show with regards to the European maps. The precip maps, the snow maps are not available. You can go to weather.us because he does put them up there. But what he does is he kind of changes them a little bit. So, but either way, take a look at Ryan Mao's site, weather.us, because he does have some snow maps up there from the European model.
Somebody says juice up the volume.
Is it that low, or we're just talking low? I got it set pretty high. I have my settings the way they usually are, so they should be okay. Anybody else having a volume problem, just let me know. I know it's a little late in the show, but what can I tell you? Let's see. Ben McGinnis, I highly encourage everyone to look at the Nova Scotia webcams.com tomorrow. Thanks for that, Ben. I'm going to take a look at that. Nova Scotia webcams.com. Let me copy that. And definitely going to bring some of those up tomorrow if they let us. Central Park, 150-year history. Only 9 Decembers with snowstorms of 12 inches or more. Earliest is December 5th, 2003.
December 5th, 2003.
Well, let's go take a look.
Oh, wait a minute.
I can bring it up.
Okay.
Hold on. William, how can you have all these models disagree with each other? Not one is the same. I know, and it happens. Especially in the long range, it happens. This is probably one of the more extreme differences because it's really not that far in the long range, Joe. We're talking inside 168 hours. We're inside 7 days. Right. That's a pretty big difference between the European and the GFS. And the Canadian is split the difference. The Icon is completely to the left of all the other models. There's a huge wide variation. Part of that may have to do with the fact that we're still kind of in a stretched out pattern with a strong Pacific North America index and a relatively strong NAO because the block is still there. That could be having some impact because the models might be holding on to the block a little bit longer on some models versus the others. But let's bring up that surface map because we can actually go to that date. So why don't we take a look?
I wonder if that was I remember there was a storm. It was a Friday-Saturday event. So maybe that's what I'm thinking of, the 2003 storm.
I have a vague recollection of it, but let's see. So
that may be the storm where, at that time, the mayor of Yonkers was Mayor Spencer, and for whatever reason, very similar to what we went through in the tri-state area 2 weeks ago, the city of Yonkers, they did not do anything to the roadways. And I think it was a Friday afternoon, and a lot of the kids got stuck because they couldn't get home.
But they salted the roads in Jersey today along and north of Route 80.
Now, what was the date? It
was, what did he say, the 5th?
The 5th of...
So I'll start from the 3rd. So let's go to December 3rd.
It's a Friday-Saturday event. Let's see if this is the one
So this is
remember.
Wednesday the 3rd. Yeah, so Friday would be the 5th and Saturday is the 6th.
Right.
Okay, so we'll move these maps along. Got a high in Virginia. Higher pressures start to build. Let me just get a little wider.
There we go. The beginnings of like an inverted trough at the bottom of the high.
Now you've got high pressure in southeastern Canada. Yeah, there's your low in western Kentucky. Warm front, extending warm and coastal front off the Carolinas. This is Thursday the 4th. Okay. Looks like temperatures are in the low and mid 40s around New Jersey. Mm-hmm. And then you've got low 30s as you go up through New England and upstate New York. This is at 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Right.
All right, so let's move along. Let me make sure I got them. Yeah, everybody's seeing.
I think there was one storm on Friday, and there was a second storm that hit on Saturday.
All right, so let's.
It was like a double. It was like a double header, Joe. The first was on Friday, and that really screwed everything up for the school kids. And then there was yet a second storm close on the heels of the first, which brought another round of significant snow.
Right. So here's Friday morning. You've got a kind of a weak 10-12 low, high pressure building down to the north. Looks like some precip breaking out, upper 20s and low 30s. From eastern PA down even to southern New Jersey, looking at numbers like 33 there that I can see, that my tired eyes show. That low moves up, starts to occlude out. So now we're into Friday night. Yeah, it's kind of elongating east-northeast.
Right.
So you probably had precip prolonged, and you got all this cold. Look at the temperatures up just to our north in the teens, and even down to some single digits showing up there. So that must have been a fairly strong push of cold air that came down from the north to support it. Yeah, the low just sat there right through Saturday.
Yep.
And then moved out finally by Sunday. This was a long duration event.
Right.
I'd love to see what the upper air looked like with this. I must have worked it because it was a weekend when I was working at WPIX at the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very interesting. That was a 3-4 was a solid winter for snowfall. 2-3, 3-4, 4-5, and 5-6 were all solid snow winters.
Right.
But that was a nice, interesting early storm back on December 5 and 6, and I guess for southeastern New England it goes into Sunday the 7th.
Right. And again, I was working over at News 12 at that time. We were based in Yonkers on Executive Boulevard. And we started getting, around 4 or 5 o'clock, a raft of complaints, not because of what we were doing on the air, but from parents and from people in general who were saying, what happened? Didn't they get the memo that we were going to get a snowstorm today? Because the roads around Yonkers were horrendous. And we started getting reports of school buses that were getting stuck and school kids who couldn't get home. And that, again, was only the first of there was a bit of a let up on Friday night, and then there was another round, as we just saw with a second storm on Saturday. So that was like a 1-2 punch. But basically, I think, at least in the city of Yonkers, back in with that storm, they didn't do anything to the roads, just like 2 weeks ago, and it ended up being a disaster. Maybe they thought that there was going to be more rain or anything else, but it was a mess.
Ben McGinnis, I'm on that site. I'll put the link up for everybody, the full link up on the chat board for those of you who'd like to see. I'm on that site for Nova Scotia webcams. Of course, you can't see much now because it's dark, but there's the link, everybody, if you want to kind of bookmark it for yourselves and take a look at that for tomorrow. I see New York Jets fan is on tonight, Ryan Kane.
You still have one? They still
have one, yes. Brandon Kastner, Justin Stewart, all a big welcome. February 2004, got 39 inches in downtown Halifax. So Justin Stewart's up in Halifax and watching right now. I'm just running back. If I missed any of your questions, Ben McGinnis, the Cape Breton Highlands are steep cliffs along the coast with the plateau inland and the I don't know how you say that, les Suite winds.
No.
Are the winds that come off the plateau and down the mountains. It regularly gets over 200 kilometers an hour.
Wow.
That's awesome. That's insane.
200 kilometers an hour. That's what, 100?
That's 130, 140, 60%.
Yeah.
That's insane. Wow.
We talk about Mount Washington
That's
sometimes.
60, 120 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Highlands, a whole new ball game. Sydney gets the rain, and they get 20 centimeters of snow. I got to go. It's on my list of places to go. I have to go to Nova Scotia and to Newfoundland. I've got to see this.
Nova Scotia, there's one spot, and maybe one of our viewers here knows exactly where this is. It's called Magnetic Hill, and you go up you go on a hill, and it's as if, and then you put your car in neutral, and the car is like, or it's not even a hill. You don't even think it's a hill, but all of a sudden the car is being pulled back.
Yeah,
it's like you're going up a hill. It's very it's weird. I love Nova Scotia. You have to get out there, Joe. Nova Scotia and Newfoundland, two great places to go to. We went one year. We went on the Blue Nose. That's a ferry that leaves, I think, out of Bar Harbor, Maine, and it's an overnight thing. And you drive on to the Blue Nose. And then you wake up in the morning, and there you are. In the I think it's in Yarmouth, Nova Scotia. We end up. It's a great place.
Ryan, we took care of the snow threat for the quote-unquote snow threat. I wouldn't call it a snow threat yet because we still don't know whether that first low is going to, that second low for Tuesday is going to come out that way. So, tomorrow, Friday, the next 3 days, we're going to spend our time just kind of figuring out what's going to happen. I tend to favor the idea that it's going to be something that's going to travel further south and not go up the west side of the Appalachians, because you've got this first lead low that is going out, and that basically is going to bring the heights down, bring the jet stream down further south. So the second system is going to want to go further south. I just don't think that there's going to be a ridge popping up in between that you're going to want to send that energy more toward the Great Lakes. As far as there is, the models do make another one behind it, but let's get this this first one here. Okay, let's get Saturday done, and then let's focus on Tuesday. Saturday's going to be the Saturday system's very important here, because if that gets hung up as it moves out to the northeast, it gets hung up when it gets into eastern Canada. If that upper low takes longer to get out of the way, that's going to force the next system to go further south. So definitely have to pay attention. We just can't go on know the answer to that.
In the winter season, and especially in an active winter season where you have one wave after another, after another, after another, any one of those that ends up either moving a little slower than anticipated or faster than anticipated, or gets stronger or weaker, all of that has a say in what's going to happen with the systems that are immediately behind. So you could go home and write out your schedule for the next 6 to 10 days or 8 to 14 days. But if one or two of those systems kind of does something that you're not expecting, it's like a domino effect. It's going to end up impacting all the other systems that are going to be eventually coming our way from behind.
Carl Welch says, stop at Prince Edward Island over the world's largest bridge, the Confederation Bridge 3.
That's right, Prince Edward Island too. That's like almost it's on the north or northwest side of the island of Nova Scotia. That too, and might as well mention New Brunswick too, which is more of a mainland province, but still considered one of the Canadian Maritime Provinces. And you know what? It must be an interesting place to go to if it's possible to go to Sable Island, which is a teeny tiny little island right off of Nova Scotia. It just like sits out there, and I don't know what goes on if anybody lives there or whether or not it's uninhabited or whatever. But it must be interesting to be there.
All right, Nitrovert, you're going to get the last. You're going to be the last question. Question tonight because Joe and I both have to go at this point. But he's in southeastern Minnesota, so he's actually looking at this first low that is going by, and we're going to bring the NAM up. I actually kind of centered this over into the Midwest, so we're going to look at the NAM, and we'll run it. Let me get it backwards a little bit. Come on,
Joe, you got to be.
I'm not the most patient soul in the world. Yeah. All right, so here's your low.
Could be worse. Could be the 2.LFM.
Yeah. I mean, you do have a pretty wrapped up little surface low there, and it does have this narrow band of moderate to heavy snow into southeastern Minnesota. The model's been pretty consistent. It's kind of like this, I don't know quite how to describe it, but
a fulcrum?
It does kind of have this sort of teeter-totter look to it because of the upper low that's there. I'm just kind of curious as to what kind of snow it generates. Well, you know what? If you're going to get these liquid amounts, and this is all 10 to 1 that's being shown here, and with the dynamics, printing out some big numbers for northeastern Nebraska into western Iowa, lower numbers for southeastern Minnesota. Now you're specifically asking, I'm doing this like on the fly, so I'm just kind of doing this a very cursory view. We are seeing some winds, sustained winds, and the greens are all 20 knots or higher. Well, I mean, I suppose it's possible that, you could wind up with, 20 to 30 mile an hour winds with gusts, with higher gusts with that surface low there and the high pressing to the north. Maybe you have a shot at it. Again, I'm just doing a very cursory view here for you. So you've got something to pay attention to because it looks, at least with the surface, with the way the low is going with that first system, Nitrovert, you are going to get some snow out of that. So check back tomorrow, and we'll definitely take another look.
And you see how sharp the cutoff line is with the snow.
Yes.
The northern edge of that snow, which we sometimes have had that kind of a problem here, where it gives you a headache, like where the snow is going to fall and where it's not.
Ben McGinnis says he talks about Sable Island, the graveyard of the Atlantic. 500 shipwrecks there since the 1500s.
Wow. That's a pretty interesting region of the world, the Canadian Maritimes. So it's a nice. I'd go back maybe one of these summers.
Well, like I said, it's on my list, and also on our list now. We got to go. Okay. Thanks very much for being here tonight. Very interesting show tonight. It was not often that we spend. I try to take a look at the weather in Canada.
Right.
And of course, now we're in the time of year where you're going to see those big storms. So we will, of course, pay attention. We have our friends that are on board here tonight from Nova Scotia and from southeastern Canada. So appreciate all the pertinent important information. A lot of this is foreign to us because we're not living there. So unless you spend some time in a climate, it's hard to get a grasp of what happens from day to day. You worked it at least.
Well, yeah. Nova Scotia. I had as I said, a radio station I used to do for a few years, and and then of course being there physically, helps a little bit. I actually visited the Environment Canada Weather Service in Halifax, and it was interesting to see how their operation is relative to, let's say, the National Weather Service offices that we have here in the States. But again, it's a really interesting zone, and I'm sure even for them, this is kind of strange to get walloped like this early in the season.
You don't see 949, 948 lows that often.
Yeah.
New York Jets fan wants us to go like we did last night on the Joe and Joe Weather Show. We sang a few bars of "We Are Santa's Elves" from Rudolph. I'm not feeling it tonight. Okay, I'm just not feeling it tonight. So we're not going to do it. Besides, the show was on last night.
I'm sure it's going to be repeated. They had it on much too early. I don't remember Rudolph ever being on as early as the 27th of November. This is ridiculous. Come on, you're gonna air these Christmas shows. Air them a little bit closer to Christmas.
Was the Rockefeller Center tree lighting tonight?
It's tonight.
Maybe that's why.
It's supposed to be happening in about 1 hour. In fact.
Maybe that's why.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Anyway, we don't make time. We don't schedule shows into time slots. That's somebody else's issue.
Yes.
So we will be. Joe and I will be back tonight at 9:20 on my Facebook page, Meteorologist Joe Chaffee. So by all means, if you're on Facebook, join us there. And I'm trying to think of what else we have going on. Anything else going on?
Not for the moment. Nothing. I think we've been on now for 55 minutes and 45 seconds. And if we haven't covered everything in that time frame, I don't know what we could actually add to that.
Yeah, all right, so let's let it go. All right, normal stuff tomorrow, YouTube live stream at 7 o'clock. Tonight, the Joe and Joe Show, 9:20 on Facebook. Have a great evening, everybody. We'll either see you later or we'll see you tomorrow. And my Patreon folks, going to try and do a live stream tomorrow morning for Patreon members only. So you need to join the platform in order to see those private live streams. So you can check out, I got links all over the place, and there's a link on the descriptor to this video and the descriptor to this live stream, and they pop up from time to time along the way. So thanks very much for those of you who have joined, by the way. We'll see you guys tomorrow morning. Have a great night, and we'll see you. Take care.
Bye.